My name is Alejandro Orengo. I'm from the Nerdy Basement. I'm here with Tom C. Brown, the director of the short film Christopher by the Sea. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I saw a short film, I think it was 2 days ago. Excellent short film. Love like the animation style. It was very beautiful. So how did you came up with the story of like a passenger traveling through a cargo ship? Because that's like a very interesting premise for like a story.
Right. So back in 2015, Michael Fukushima, who was at the NFB at the time, the National Film Board of Canada, he posted about this artist residency called 23 Days at Sea, which was you got on a cargo ship on the West Coast, and then you were at sea for 23 days. And when you got to Japan, you had like a gallery space set up, and you showed the art that you'd been making on the cargo ship.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was such a crazy, weird idea. And then I was like obsessed with this idea of being on a cargo ship. And I applied for the residency, but I didn't get it. But that's okay because your first no is on your road to your first yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't matter too much.
Yeah.
And I had always wanted to write a kind of romance kind of film.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of combined those two ideas together. And then I convinced PSYOP, my production company, to pay for me to go as a passenger on a cargo ship as like a research trip that I used as a sort of writing residency. And I really love that juxtaposition between the beauty of nature and being at sea, and then like this really industrial design of a cargo ship. It's such a cool like juxtaposition between those two things.
Yeah, because there's like an element of luxury, but there's a contrast of just hardworking people just going by their day to day. So it's kind of that's why I loved about it so much, because he's like living that type of facade almost, because he's like, they gave him like the wine, like the steak, and then everyone is like eating like normal stuff. And they're like, oh, okay, this guy's doing that. So it's very interesting. I loved it. It was great. So how important is it for you to tell like these kind of like LGBTQ plus stories through an animation medium?
Right. I think that, animation is predominantly a space where straight white men tell a lot of stories. And so, I really wanted to do what I could to make a little change and like bring a different perspective. I mean, I'm still a white man, but I'm gay, so
yeah,
bringing my truth and like an element of my story. It's the greatest stories come from your personal experience. So I wanted to bring that into the animation world and bring a little more diversity to what animation has to offer.
So the film, there's a lot of themes that like you talk about through the film. So some of the ones that I picked up was about like depression, repression, and like essentially losing one's sanity to some degree. How does the color palette and your animation style accentuate these themes specifically?
Well, I really tried to use the color palette as a way of bringing people into Christopher's like internal world. So a lot of the colors on the like day-to-day life of the ship are quite kind of monotone and kind of in the browns and grays sort of area. And then as we move into Christopher's fantasies or delusions or whatever they are, I start to really amp up not just the kind of psychedelic look of the animation, but also in the color palettes and stuff to really kind of push the audience into a different space that is kind of representing Christopher's internal world. And and then other spaces in the ship as well kind of had their own palette. So like the engine room is this really vibrant green that complements the yellow of his sweater, and just trying to push stuff around like that.
So going through the idea of like color palette, you also used basically different camera angles and different camera movements, camera lenses too. There's a lot of like wide lenses. So talk to me a lot about that, because you know, obviously animation, you can play around with it, but you made it seem very purposeful, that you wanted to make it seem almost as if you shot it with actual cameras.
Right.
So was that like the intent, and like what was the thought process behind that?
So I it's in Cinescope, so I really wanted a kind of cinematic look to the film, and I chose a lot of kind of camera angles that were reminiscent of more sort of traditional filmmaking for the parts of the story that are more like the monotonous day-to-day life of the ship. So it had a kind of realism to it that spoke to that. And then using the animation for what animation is so great at, I could take that kind of world that we establish and pull people out of it when we go into Christopher's fantasies and start distorting the lens and distorting physics and all of that kind of stuff to really push people into the psychedelia of Christopher's imaginings. So it was a kind of a way of, it's a sort of Trojan horse where you set up people's expectations of the world and kind of bring people into this beautiful world that you're creating. And once they feel comfortable in that, you can start pulling the audience around a bit by disrupting that.
So then also the film has like hand drawn animation, but you also blended it a little bit with like either CGI or like 3D elements, or even like live action elements, like with the usage, for example, of the water. I noticed like when he looks out into the water, it looks like 3D. And like the last shot of the movie, it has like almost like water flicks on the lens. So talk to me a little bit about that, because it's interesting. You blended two different animation styles in your movie as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things we quickly realized when you make a film set on a boat is that you have to animate a lot of water because the boat is in the water. So we were trying to like figure out ways in which we could do that. And because of the cinematic language and it feeling quite live action, like a fully 2D ocean just didn't feel quite right. So we created I think 5 different ocean sims for various levels of stormy waves, and then composited those together in Houdini to try and make them a little more 2D looking, so it wasn't so outside of the illustrative world of the animation. And then in After Effects, we combined those renders, the CG renders, with animating textures, and also all of the white caps of the waves are all hand painted on top, so that we can kind of blend those two worlds together and get a nice sim of the ocean and like realistic kind of looking waves, but bring a bit of a painterly element into them. And actually one of the textures we use in the ocean a lot is the same texture as Christopher's sweater. So you get that kind of correlation. Yeah, you get the correlation between Christopher and the sea.
Oh, I love it. That's great. So then talk to me a little bit of your ending, because you kind of made it purposely ambiguous. Was that obviously I'm assuming it was done on purpose. So what's the idea behind it? You want people to think that either something happened, didn't happen?
Sure. Well, I had this I've lived with this sort of prophecy of me drowning my whole life, from my mom when she was pregnant with me was all plagued by these nightmares of me drowning. And so, the film set on a boat, it's the perfect place to kind of explore that. And I created a dual narrative for the ending, to kind of make it ambiguous and leave it up to the audience to sort of decide what happened. But the ending for me kind of represents, when you do come out of the closet and go and live your truth, there is a kind of part of you that has to die, that like imagined heteronormative self, and that life that you and other people have all kind of imagined for you. So I'm sort of using it as a metaphor for Christopher letting go of that part of himself, and which enables him to live his truth.
Okay. So if you were, this is a fun one. If you were to throw a message in a bottle into the ocean, what would it say?
Ooh,
right?
What would they? I suppose it would have to be like a some kind of love poem or some like message to the universe for some wonderful. So far, I want every outfit. I'm a romanticist, and
yeah,
I would love to put a little love note in the bottle, and the universe will, make it find its way to who it needs to.
That's great. I love it. Name 5 movies you would think you think everyone should see in life, and why?
Luchino Visconti's Death in Venice, because it's
nice.
one of the greatest films ever made. And also, that was the first time I think I'd ever seen myself in film. It's Gustav von Aschenbein. And also the melodrama in it is beautiful. And the cinematography, it's all amazing. Luchino Visconti is my number 1 guy. Number 2, Disney's Sleeping Beauty. Yeah. And I'm sure everyone's kind of seen it, but the backgrounds and the art in that film are just so incredible that it should be revisited if you haven't seen it since you were a kid. So that's 2. What else is on my list of films you got to see? Have you seen Triangle of Sadness yet?
Oh yes, I saw it in a festival recently. Great.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Triangle of Sadness. You got to get to the cinema and watch that film with a crowd.
Definitely.
It's a cinematic masterpiece, and the storm sequences in that are so good. So that's a new one I would recommend. And then Barry Lyndon, of course.
Oh yeah.
The Candles, just for the candles.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Is that 4? One more. Okay, it's got to be a good one. I'm trying to think. Tokyo Story.
Oh yes, nice. Yeah.
That was a big inspiration, Christopher. Just the way in which you really feel like the layout of the spaces that they're in, and the geography of the film is just like so good. And also the framing in that film is beautiful as well. Yeah. So I'd say that one.
That's great. Okay, this is my last question then. What is the one thing you'd be really disappointed if you never got to experience?
And I still haven't done it.
Yeah.
Right. I've never dropped acid.
Oh, nice.
I'm building my way up to it.
Oh yeah.
But if I never got to do that, I think I'd be sad about that. I want to expand my mind. Is that allowed on this podcast?
Oh, I think it's fine. It's great. It's great. It's a great answer. Yeah. You can then do it like a short film or like a movie out of it too. Like the experience, right. Yeah, definitely. That's great. Well, Tom, thank you for your time. Thank you for taking your time to speak with me. Everyone, whenever they get a chance, they should go check Christopher Nolan. It's an incredible short film, great animation, great story, great romantic thriller. It's very phenomenally done. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.